Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the topics you send our way, the source material you're curious about, and we really dig in.
We try to get to the heart of it.
Exactly. And today, our mission, should we choose to accept it?
Which we do.
Right. We're exploring these fascinating, unsolved ancient mysteries, lost civilizations. It's all based on material one of you sent in.
That's right. We're looking specifically at a YouTube discussion featuring researcher Matt LaCroix. And the big idea here, the one that kind of underpins everything, is challenging that standard historical story we all learn.
Yeah, the conventional narrative.
Right. We're looking at evidence that suggests maybe, just maybe, there were really advanced civilizations around, way before the history books tell us.
And the questions this stuff raises, they're seriously compelling. Like, how on earth did ancient people move these absolutely massive stones and cut them so perfectly?
Mind-boggling stuff.
Totally. And the pyramids, if they weren't just tombs, what were they for? What happened to these advanced people? Could there really have been a lost, golden age?
Big questions. So where should we start? The stonework seems like a good place. Visually, it's just incredible.
Okay, yeah. The megalithic stonework, it's everywhere, isn't it?
It really is, all across the globe. And what's striking isn't just the size, but the precision. It's remarkably consistent.
So you're talking sites like Kesi in Turkey, Sacsayhuaman in Peru.
Exactly. The Great Pyramid, obviously.
Yeah.
Baalbek in Lebanon, you've got the triathon there. That's one stone, about 1,200 tons.
1,200 tons, just one block.
And then there's the Yangshan Quarry in China. They left one there that's estimated at 16,000 tons.
16,000, I can't even picture that. And the source material we looked at really hammers home the lack of errors. These aren't just rough-hewn blocks piled up.
No, far from it. They fit together seamlessly, sometimes with complex angles. It really challenges the idea that this was all done with, basic Bronze Age or Iron Age tools.
Especially with the really hard stones they were using, basalt, andesite, granite. How do you quarry, move, and shape that stuff so perfectly with just chisels and hammer?
That is the core mystery, isn't it? The source talks about laser-cut precision. You see it at places like Pumapunku in Bolivia, these incredibly sharp, precise cuts.
Right. And Kesi, that example of carvings flowing perfectly across multiple joined blocks. How do you even do that?
It suggests maybe they were working the stone in a different way. The source speculates about advanced techniques, maybe vibrations, frequencies, something we don't quite get. It looks more like modern machine work in some cases.
And it's not just the cuts. What about those weird scoop marks they found in the Aswan granite quarries in Egypt?
Yes. Those are bizarre. It looks like somebody just scooped out huge chunks of incredibly hard granite, leaving these smooth, curved indentations. Standard tools don't really explain that pattern.
Okay, so all this physical evidence, it really starts to poke holes in the standard timeline, doesn't it? What is the accepted story, generally?
Generally, the mainstream view is that civilization, cities, writing, complex society, it starts with the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, maybe 6,000 years ago. Everything before that is typically seen as hunter-gatherers, maybe early farming villages. Primitive, basically.
But these megalithic sites seem way too sophisticated for that label.
That's the argument. Many of these sites show incredible engineering skills that seem to predate the known cultures we associate with those regions. Like in Peru, the stonework at places like Sacsayhuaman seems far beyond what we think the Incas could do with their known tools, even though they occupied the site later.
So the Incas might have inherited it, not built it all.
That's a strong possibility raised in the source. We see similar patterns potentially in Egypt with structures that might be older than the dynastic Egyptians, and definitely in Eastern Turkey.
And Eastern Turkey is a real hotbed right now, isn't it? Beyond just Göbekli Tepe and Kara Tepe.
Absolutely. The material mentions ongoing work much further east. Sites like Kurut, a newly found temple complex with this precise megalithic stonework. And some of these might actually be newer than Göbekli Tepe, which adds another layer of complexity. It suggests a long period of this kind of building.
And there are underwater sites too, in Lake Van. We'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes, definitely. What's also interesting, and the source brings this up, is this phenomenon you see at various sites where later cultures, seemingly less advanced in stoneworking, built right on top of these incredible megalithic foundations.
Like mud bricks on top of perfectly cut, massive stone blocks.
Exactly. And often, archaeology is tempted to credit the later known culture with the entire structure, which, well, doesn't always add up when you see the stark difference in technology and skill.
It's like finding, I don't know, a medieval hut built on the foundations of a skyscraper and saying the hut builders constructed the whole thing.
That's a good analogy, yeah. It just doesn't quite fit the evidence sometimes.
Which leads us neatly to the Great Pyramids. The source makes a really big point about them supposedly being tombs.
Yes, the tomb theory is challenged. The key point raised is that despite the massive effort, no pharaoh's body, no original burial, no contemporary inscriptions confirming it as a tomb for someone like Khufu have ever been found inside the Great Pyramid itself.
Which is weird, right? For such a monumental undertaking, supposedly for a burial.
It is strange, especially when you consider the sheer scale, about 2.5 million stone blocks, averaging, 3 to 10 tons each, some much heavier.
And not just the number, but placing them. The source mentions those huge granite beams way up high inside in the king's chamber.
Right, hundreds of feet off the ground. Lifting multi-ton granite blocks that high and positioning them with such accuracy using only simple ramps and levers. It seems incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, as we understand their tools.
Especially when you compare it to the Valley of the Kings.
Exactly. In the Valley of the Kings, they have found numerous pharaohs' tombs, undisturbed ones like Tutankhamun's, full of inscriptions, bodies, grave goods, everything you'd expect from a royal burial complex. We don't see that in the Great Pyramids.
And the source even brings up the controversial idea that the inscription attributing the Great Pyramid to Khufu might be a much later forgery from the 1800s.
Yes, that theory is mentioned. It suggests Colonel Vyse might have faked the cartouche in the 1830s to claim the discovery. If true, it completely undermines the standard attribution and opens the door wide for other possibilities about its age and purpose.
Wow. Okay, so if the pyramids aren't just tombs and ancient people were capable of this incredible engineering, what else are we missing? The source talks about hidden evidence, maybe even underground.
It does. It mentions the work of Dr. Robert Schoch, using technology like sonar and LiDAR, ground-penetrating radar around the Sphinx.
What did he find? Or what does he think is there?
He's identified anomalies suggesting possible chambers or tunnels, particularly beneath the paws of the Sphinx. Void spaces.
Like the legendary Hall of Records, almost.
Well, that's the kind of speculation it fuels. But the interesting part in the source material is the claim that further investigation, like drilling, has been blocked by Egyptian authorities.
Really? Why would they do that?
The suggestion in the material, and this is controversial of course, is a potential reluctance to uncover things that might drastically rewrite the accepted history. A kind of resistance to paradigm-shifting discoveries. The source mentions alleged similar incidents around Lake Van discoveries back in the 60s.
So a possible cover-up, or at least a resistance to looking. That ties into the whole idea of a lost civilization, doesn't it? A forgotten golden age, perhaps.
It feeds directly into that narrative. The idea of an advanced, maybe global civilization that existed long ago and was then wiped out by some kind of catastrophe.
And the source mentions specific ideas about what that catastrophe might have been, right? Around 12,000 years ago.
Yes, focused on the Younger Dryas period, which was a time of major climate upheaval. The two main theories discussed in the material are, one, a cosmic impact, like asteroids or comet fragments hitting the Earth. That's championed by people like Graham Hancock and Rand Carlson.
Okay, the impact hypothesis. What's the other one?
The other is a massive solar event, huge solar flares or coronal mass ejections, causing extreme geomagnetic storms, possibly triggering earthquakes, volcanic activity, rapid climate change. Robert Schoch leans more towards this explanation.
Either way, something devastating happened.
Absolutely. The geological and paleontological records show widespread species extinctions and abrupt climate shifts around that time. So a major global cataclysm isn't just speculation. There's evidence something big occurred.
And this could explain why some ancient sites seem deliberately buried, like Göbekli Tepe.
That's one interpretation discussed, that maybe survivors deliberately buried sacred or important sites to protect them from the chaos or preserve them for the future. It's hard to know for sure, but Göbekli Tepe was intentionally backfilled.
And the Easter Island statues, the Moai, the source uses them as an example too.
Right. Many of them were found buried up to their necks or shoulders in sediment. The argument is, how could so much soil accumulate around them if they were only built, say, 800 or 1,000 years ago? It suggests they might be much, much older, potentially pre-cataclysm.
Just like the Sphinx, also found buried in sand.
Exactly the same logic. The sheer amount of sand covering the Sphinx body suggests a much greater age than the standard dynastic Egyptian timeline allows.
And people needed shelter from these events. The source mentions the underground cities in Turkey.
Yes, like Derinkuyu and Kamakli. Massive, complex underground cities that can house thousands of people. Were they built specifically as shelters from surface cataclysms? It's a compelling possibility.
Okay, let's circle back to the Sphinx itself. Besides being buried, there's the issue of its head, right?
Yes, the head is noticeably small in proportion to the massive lion-like body. It looks off.
So the theory is it wasn't originally a pharaoh's head.
That's the theory presented in the source, that it was originally carved as a full lion, likely representing the constellation Leo, which was astronomically significant, especially during the age of Leo thousands of years ago, a guardian figure.
Which connects to ancient Egyptian star knowledge and maybe those Hermetic texts you mentioned?
Precisely. The Hermetic texts talk about ancient wisdom and archives. The idea is that the original lion sphinx, perhaps guarding knowledge stored beneath it, was later recarved by dynastic Egyptians into a pharaoh's likeness, maybe Khufu or Khafre, kind of imposing their mark on something much older.
Recarving it, almost disrespecting the original. Interesting. And speaking of hidden things, let's get back to Lake Van in eastern Turkey. Underwater ruins.
Yes, this is a fascinating part of the material. A diver named Tosun Selin, who's apparently now working with Matt LaCroix, accidentally discovered these megalithic structures underwater in Lake Van.
How deep are we talking?
About 75 feet deep, according to the source, which is crucial because it means the lake level must have been at least 80 to 100 feet lower when those structures were actually built on dry land.
And these aren't just minor finds, they're significant.
Apparently so. The source contrasts them with other underwater finds globally, which are sometimes just mud brick or less substantial. These are described as megalithic, suggesting sophisticated construction similar to what we see on land in that region.
Okay, so why was the lake level so much lower, and how does that help date them?
This is where the geology of Lake Van becomes key. It's a very unique lake, highly alkaline, a soda lake, and crucially, it has no natural outlet now.
Ah, so the water level is pretty stable usually.
Under current conditions, yes. The source brings in evidence of a major volcanic eruption nearby Mount Nemrut, not the one with the statues, a different one near the lake. This eruption happened around, guess when?
Let me guess. Around 12,000 years ago. Younger Dryas time.
Bang on. Around 12,000 years ago. And the key finding is that this eruption blocked the lake's original outlet river, the Murat River.
So before the eruption, the lake had an outlet and was much lower.
That's the argument. The eruption dammed the river, causing the lake level to rise dramatically over time, eventually submerging these structures that were built on the ancient shoreline.
Which means the structures must predate the eruption. They have to be older than 12,000 years.
That's the logical conclusion presented. It provides a potential minimum age for these underwater megalithic ruins, pushing them firmly into that pre-Younger Dryas time frame, potentially linking them to this proposed lost civilization. It's described as a pretty new and potentially groundbreaking line of evidence.
That is really compelling, connecting geology, archaeology, and this potential cataclysm.
Wow. Okay, now the source also talks quite a bit about the Anunnaki. Who or what are they supposed to be?
The Anunnaki come from ancient Mesopotamian texts, Sumerian, Akkadian, Assyrian. They are described as the principal deities, the main gods in their pantheon.
Often connected with ancient astronaut theories, right? Yes, that connection is often made. But the perspective in the source material seems to lean more towards them being, let's say, celestial creators or balancers within the mythological framework, rather than necessarily physical aliens in ships.
So more like gods or divine beings who interacted with early humans?
Something like that.
Yeah.
The Sumerians, who invented so much writing, law, astronomy, math, attributed the source of this knowledge to the Anunnaki. They believed this knowledge was given to them.
And the source draws parallels to other mythologies.
Yes, suggesting that figures like the Hindu gods, the Greek gods, might be different cultural interpretations of similar powerful beings or forces involved in humanity's development during a possible global golden age.
There's also mention of humanity being created in their image and something about chromosome counts.
Right. The source touches on the Sumerian creation stories where humans are fashioned by the gods, and also the biological anomaly, where humans have 46 chromosomes, while other great apes have 48. It's presented as a point of intrigue, suggesting maybe not purely natural evolution.
And the story of Adapa.
Yes, the Sumerian Adam figure, Adapa, who is described as incredibly wise, perhaps even surpassing the Anunnaki in some ways. It adds complexity to the creation narrative. Hermetic philosophy, mentioned again in the source, even positions the Anunnaki as part of the second mind of God, related to the energetic blueprint of creation.
For listeners who might be skeptical, thinking this sounds like pure myth, what evidence does the source point to?
It points to the sheer number of ancient cuneiform tablets that talk about the Anunnaki and their activities. Epics like Edrahassis and Gilgamesh contain detailed stories, including the famous flood narrative.
The flood story, that's a big one.
It is. The source emphasizes that the Sumerian flood story, with a figure named Ziusudra being warned by the god Enki to build an ark because the other gods decided humanity was too noisy or imbalanced.
Noisy, like literally making too much noise.
It's often interpreted as humanity having become unbalanced or disruptive. Anyway, this story, with Ziusudra surviving the flood, predates the biblical story of Noah by millennia.
And there's physical evidence related to that.
The source mentions the archaeological discovery of the ruins of Shurupak, Zisudra's traditional city, buried beneath a thick layer of flood sediment, lending some potential historical weight to the ancient myths.
So the Anunnaki are potentially linked to these cycles of creation and destruction, deciding to hit reset with a flood.
That's the narrative in the texts. A council decision to wipe the slate clean, but one god, Enki, secretly saves humanity through Ziusudra. The source even suggests this deluge might be a separate, much older event than the Younger Dryas cataclysm.
Older? How much older?
Based on things like Antarctic ice core data hinting at major climate shifts, the source speculates that the deluge might have been as far back as 40,000 or 45,000 years ago, implying multiple cycles of civilization rising and falling.
Which makes you think about our current civilization. Are we in another cycle?
It definitely provokes that thought, doesn't it? It suggests history might be cyclical rather than purely linear.
Okay, so bringing it all together, what does the source material identify as the biggest, maybe most persistent misconceptions we have about ancient history?
Well, first, the idea that the Great Pyramids were just tombs built by slaves dragging stones across the desert. The source basically calls this view illogical given the scale, precision, and lack of actual burials found inside.
Right, the engineering challenges seem immense for that explanation.
Exactly. Second, the notion that Göbekli Tepe, this incredibly complex site older than 11,000 years, was built by simple hunter-gatherers just starting to settle down. It challenges the whole definition of what primitive means and what humans were capable of so long ago.
It forces a rethink of the whole timeline before Sumeria.
It really does. It suggests a potential collective amnesia about a much deeper, more sophisticated past. The source uses Machu Picchu again as an example. You see the rougher Inca stonework built directly on top of much older, far superior megalithic foundations. It looks like they inherited a site they couldn't replicate.
It's a pattern seen worldwide, this layering of culture.
It seems to be. So the key takeaways from this deep dive really are, 1, there's compelling physical evidence for highly sophisticated ancient civilizations predating the accepted timeline.
2, this evidence seriously challenges the standard historical narrative and raises questions about how these megalithic structures were actually built.
3, the possibility of global cataclysms like the Younger Dryas events wiping out a previous golden age is a recurring theme supported by some geological and archaeological data.
4, figures like the Anunnaki from ancient myths offer an alternative, though controversial, framework for understanding human origins and ancient knowledge.
And finally, the overarching message is the importance of questioning what we think we know, staying open to new evidence, and recognizing that our understanding of human history might be radically incomplete.
It definitely leaves you wondering if we've potentially forgotten so much about our deep past, our technological origins, maybe even surviving cataclysms. What else have we forgotten? What knowledge or capabilities might still be latent within us?
It's a profound question with implications for how we see ourselves and our potential moving forward.
Absolutely. If you, the listener, want to explore this further, the source material points towards Matt LaQuarrie's work. His website is thestageoftime.com, and he has a YouTube channel. He apparently has a new book and documentary coming out too.
Seems like a good resource for diving deeper into these specific theories and evidence, especially regarding Eastern Turkey and Lake Van.
It just shows that history isn't necessarily a closed book. There are still huge discoveries potentially waiting to be made that could change everything.
The exploration continues.
Definitely. Keep questioning, keep exploring. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.